So after reviewing The Dark Knight Rises, oh yeah, I did that, go look for the video in the description below. I wanted to go back and review all the superhero movies. This year, I mean. Not of all time. That'd take forever. Wow. So going backwards, it's impossible to review The Amazing Spider-Man without bringing up the version that Sam Raimi made 10 years ago. Because for all intents and purposes, that movie was good. It wasn't great. In fact, in comparison to most movies, it was actually quite bad. And there goes my nerd cred. Great. I don't have nerd cred. But there was clearly more that could be done with the character. And that's what excited me about The Amazing Spider-Man. Because it delves into the fact that Peter Parker is an orphan. He's being raised by his aunt and uncle. And one of the first things I like about this movie is that the aunt and uncle don't look like grandparents. In the first movie, they just look old as fuck. In the new version, they actually look like logical aunt and uncle. And we see the fact that Peter Parker is still coping from the fact that he doesn't have an actual father. And that makes it interesting. Problem is, that is kind of one of the only things that makes it interesting. In terms of plot, I mean. Now, I understand why Marc Webb was chosen to direct this film, besides the fact that his last name is Webb. Funny. He was chosen because of the emotional authenticity of 500 Days of Summer, which is questionable, but I digress. But Marc Webb's direction is so novice. All the plot machinations feel like machinations. Machinations? It feels like a machine. The opening is like, take a look at these papers. Oh my god! Honey, we have to go. It's a mystery. And overall, it just felt too overt and too whack you over the head. You know these guys are up to some shit. And you don't know what, but you don't feel too much of a need to know what. Which isn't a flaw in the characters, it's more a flaw in the screenplay and the direction. This film needed a greater subtlety to it, and it didn't have that. And once we get to Oscorp, things just go cartoonish. Because Oscorp is your typical evil company out to enslave the world or some shit like that. For some reason, that's just not interesting. But there are things in this movie that are interesting. The emotional turmoil that you see in Andrew Garfield's face. Andrew Garfield's performance in general. He feels so much more like a human being and like a relatable nerd instead of the cartoon nerd that Tobey Maguire was. And the way Andrew Garfield acts as Spider-Man is kinda interesting. Because he's a fucking douchebag to these criminals. And rightly so. And it's just hilarious to see him take down a guy and exchange quippy comments while he's doing it. Glib comments in The Dark Knight, annoying. Glib comments in Amazing Spider-Man, hilarious! And in general, all the cast is really good in this movie. Rhys Ifans was screwed over as the villain because the villain was pretty much a retread of what Willem Dafoe was doing. And what Willem Dafoe was doing was actually a lot more cohesive. Because he's Willem Dafoe and he has multiple personalities, and that's interesting. The Lizard isn't about multiple personalities. It's about human tragedy, and Rhys Ifans tries to do that, but the script does him no favors. Nearly everything in the script is a cliche. The whole skateboard thing, what the hell is that? Hey guys, let's find a form of personal transportation that's actually relatable to kids. How about biking? Nah, that's not cool. How about skateboards? That's cool! And it just seems weird and out of place. Also, a lot of the action feels muddled and incomprehensible. There's an action sequence in which the Lizard goes after Peter Parker, and then they fight, and then they're done, and then the Lizard's like, what was the point of that action sequence? I don't know. I really don't know. Mostly because Marc Webb is caught up in the spectacle of Spider-Man and not creating his own Spider-Man. So much of this film relies on the fact that you already know the story, and so you don't care about how it unfolds. His origin and how he turns into Spider-Man doesn't quite feel organic, and it comes at you out of left field. But back to the performances. Emma Stone is really cute and lovable as always, but her character isn't made anything more than really cute and lovable as always. And it feels like they're just manipulating her to make her feel like she's part of the action. It doesn't feel quite so organic to the character. Not that they couldn't have made it that. They could have, but they didn't. Dennis Leary is a fucking badass in this movie. But then again, Dennis Leary is a badass in real life, so it's no surprise that he's a badass in this movie too. And the person who so unexpectedly broke my fucking heart, Sally Field as an age-appropriate Aunt May. You see her throughout the film as Andrew Garfield comes in with all these different scars, and you know that she has no idea what's going on, and she can't really do anything about it. Which is a shit situation for a parent to be in. This movie is most effective when it's at its most intimate. The only action scene that works doesn't even have him as Spider-Man. It's in the scuzzy alley, and everything is just dark and grimy like actual New York, and I like the fact that they are able to capture that in this film. This movie has a lot of flaws, and it ultimately doesn't quite live up to the promise of being the movie version of the 90s Spider-Man TV show. I can't say it was a completely enjoyable time, but it could have been a lot worse. And those are my thoughts in The Amazing Spider-Man. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Check out this annotation for my review of The Dark Knight Rises. Warning, it's quite negative, and it's just my opinion. You know, these things are just my opinions. I'm not trying to convert you to sadism. And now, I'm going to exchange some quippy douchebag lines. Hey, cat got your tongue? Because there is a cat actually dangling from your tongue. That's actually kind of gross. Ew, get away from me. Look what the cat dragged in. There's a mountain lion dragging you from your ankles. Wow, that actually makes this job a lot easier for me. I don't know why all of these are cat-centric. I'm sorry.